And there is so much more to talk about, and that's where we welcome Kent Moores, Executive Chairman of the Global Strategic Investment Institute. Good to see you, sir, and welcome to the show. There's been a lot of chatter. That we've had these sanctions on Russia. Oil prices continue to move higher. I mean, arguably, it's probably had, you can tell me if it's had a positive or negative impact on oil prices, and now we have to deal with the fallout.
Well, there are a couple of things happening, Phil, and it's really quite interesting. We have technically almost 1.7 million barrels a day of oil that should be coming into the market certainly next month. We have OPEC Plus increasing by almost 650,000 barrels a day. We already have the United States committed to taking 1 million barrels a day out of our strategic petroleum reserves and placing that into the market. The interesting thing is that the market has yet to compensate for this additional volume. First off, I don't think OPEC Plus can deliver on its 650,000 barrels. It is virtually at capacity now in terms of its ability to produce and its ability to export. There is some additional play here, about 1.7 million or 1.8 million barrels a day that would readily be available from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. It's one of the reasons, of course, that Biden's going over there. But whether or not it's going to be committed is something else again.
Right.
So the
what do you think Biden's going to ask for?
I think it's going to ask for Saudi Arabia to increase its production. You have to understand that the Saudis traditionally have been the balancer in OPEC. In other words, when additional consignments had to go in, the Saudis would do it. When additional volume was supposed to be taken out, the Saudis would lead it. And they would also sort of look aside if members of OPEC were overproducing or underproducing, and they would essentially make up the difference. The amount of available excess capacity worldwide, however, is narrowing. So while the Saudis will be able to do that, it is unclear for how long, and it's unclear whether the political resolve in Riyadh will remain to do it.
And all this, of course, in response to the fact that we had these sanctions on Russia. And again, I want to come back to this, is that, you know, many countries have banned Russian oil. Do you think they could have perhaps handled that differently, maybe use a tax or an import tax or something that may have less affected the output and ultimately the demand and ultimately the prices?
Well, the ultimate objective, Phil, was to punish Moscow. An export tax would essentially punish the recipient in the importing country. So that was never really a major issue as Brussels was considering it. What is interesting, however, is the transition that's taking place. And I just finished a report, a private report for clients earlier today, talking about this transition. It's quite unlike anything we've seen recently. For example, we've had reports over the last couple of days that the Russians have made about $100 billion in oil revenues in the first 100 days of the war.
Right.
What that does not tell us, however, is that if it weren't for the significant discounts that Russia had to agree to give in order to sell that to, say, India or to China, my heavens, about 50% of all Russian oil exports today are now to China.
Right.
18% of the oil coming into India is Russian. It used to be 1% before the sanctions. Now, if you figured all of this in and determined an average price of what Russian oil actually commanded in the market prior to the sanctions, over the last 100 days, given the rise in prices internationally, the Russians should have gained about $130 to $135 billion in revenues. So the $100 billion quoted is about 30 to 35% less than what they would have if the sanctions weren't there. Here's the most interesting thing. We are already seeing in Europe a movement to increase West African and Latin American sources. They're switching shipping and supply patterns for volumes from the Atlantic basin that had been going to Asia. That means the Russians essentially will increase their sales to the Asian market. However, this is going to cost them. It's going to cost them big time. It takes them 60 days to get the oil by
Right.
tanker to Asia, 14% only from Europe. This is going to cut further into the revenue gains. And it's going to cut further into the ability to continue selling to Asia because port and pipeline capacity there are reaching their ceiling.
Right. And Kent, they have to give a discount. My sources are telling me it's anywhere between 15 and 18, sometimes 20% discount, plus the additional transportation. So that all kind of makes sense. I only got about 30 seconds left. I want to ask you about the consumer. At $5 a barrel nationwide, we've hit basically an all-time high. Why aren't we seeing more demand destruction? Why aren't we seeing drivers pull back on driving? I mean, if there was demand destruction, wouldn't that perhaps alleviate some of these high prices?
It might, although there's something else interesting happening here. And that is, by the way, by August, I still see this gasoline price going up another 15% on average nationwide. So we'll be looking at about $5.75 a gallon. But the question is where this profit is actually being made. And disproportionately, that profit is being made in the wholesale to retail level, in which the companies controlling the refineries that have been moving out to the wholesale networks have actually been increasing profits. I'm estimating now, as of this afternoon, about 31.7% of the profits that the main wholesale distributors are making are actually a result of excess profits from price increases that are not justified by the increases in crude.
Right.
So look for Washington to begin serious conversations about an excess tax upon the larger.
No, Kent, that's not good news. I could talk for hours on this topic with you, Kent. I'm sorry. We're going to have you back again. We're going to see what the next couple of weeks bring. Hopefully, there will be some good news out of Saudi Arabia or some relief, at least to the consumers at the pump. Kent Moore's joining us there. Thank you very much. Excellent insight.